Hi everybody, welcome to StashBlaster Quilts. My name is Maria, and I'm here to help you make more quilts in less time with less stress. So, our tip for this session is about purchasing new tools. So I told you last month that my hanger on the wall for my rulers fell, and it took out the one underneath it. So I have a ton of rulers. I have funky ones that are angled like this. I have one of these giant square up rulers. I don't know if you've seen these before. I have ones to cut octagons and all kinds of stuff. And to just give you an idea of how many rulers and templates, and I'm talking purchased type templates, not the ones I made myself, it completely fills this drawer. Okay, you can see it's a nice big one, plus the two that I showed you that are too big to fit in the drawer. I just haven't gotten the hanger put up yet. And so I recently had someone ask me, how do you know that you should purchase a tool versus not purchase it? It's really a lot of fun at the quilting shows to see all these new rulers being demonstrated and to want to come home with 47 of them. They all look super easy. They all look like they make the toughest of tasks a breeze to do. And, you know, there's just that whole buying vibe. Now, you can tell that I am not sponsored by a ruler company because I'm going to tell you right now not to buy them. I really, really recommend that you try a friend's copy first, or you buy it with a friend, to at least bring the cost down until you've used it a few times and you decide you like it. What tends to wind up happening is we'll purchase something for a class. So for example, I purchased this set for a class. I left the paper on so you can see it. Okay, so this goes in here like this. Well, like so. Surprisingly, it's not 100% symmetrical. So this is what got shipped to me. And I used it. I can even show you the quilt that I was making with it. This is the all scrapped quilt templates. And so I use them, and it's fine. But I haven't used them a lot. And so the only reason I purchased them off the top was for the class. And I also have another use I'm planning on making out of them. So even if I didn't like the class, I knew I would use them again. But for a lot of things, we tend to buy them and think they're really cool, and they don't even get unwrapped. So my recommendation is to borrow first. See if your guild has a lending library that would include rulers. Or you might be able to put out a note to your quilting friends and say, hey, does anybody have this octagon ruler? Do they have, you know, one of the ones where you cut through the slits versus the ones you go down the side? Try them out before you buy them. Rulers are not cheap. And there have been times that I've purchased things that have run me 50 bucks and never used them. And I could have used that money for other things in my sewing room much better. So that's my tip, is to go ahead, borrow first, or if it's a tool that's more generic, maybe purchase the least expensive version of that you can, just to see if you even reach for it when you need it, or to see how it works. And then if you want to upgrade to a better one later, going ahead and doing that. Now obviously this doesn't work with things like long arm machines, because there's a huge difference between the bottom of the pricing points and the top pricing point. But you want to make sure that to the best of your ability you try things out before you invest huge amounts of money in it. So that's my tip for this week. Okay, an update. Well, let's start with the house. So I have been doing the floors like I told you before. And so yesterday I was greeted with this. Now you should be able to see that hole right now. Let me pull up the PowerPoint so I can see if you can see it. I mean the live stream. Nope, that is not on the PowerPoint. Huh. My PowerPoint button didn't go on properly. Huh. Okay. Well, that's going to make this more difficult. So hold on a second. Let me try this another way. See, this is why I get everything ready. Now see on my screen. Oh, there we go. Now you can see it. So, as you can see right here, this is where the guy's leg came through my ceiling. And he popped all of these screws out on his way down. He didn't actually fall all the way through, just one leg. So, sadly, that had to get repaired today. And that meant that we had a delay in what could get done. And so we got the tile down, and hopefully you can see that. But they didn't get a chance to get it grouted, and they didn't get the baseboards put on. You can see back here in this back corner that I'm having them square up and use some of this tile here as my baseboards instead of doing wood. That's what I had before, and that's what I wanted again. So this is the pattern that I picked. I had originally thought, mistakenly, that this was going to be one of those kinds of tile with the separate stones and the mesh backing. So you could put in any color grout you wanted. So I picked a cream colored grout. But as you can see, these are big pieces of tile. So now I have to change to the gray that matches what's between the stones. So my whole color scheme changed, but I will live with it. It'll be fine. But I did like having the separate stone look instead of the pieces that I saw before. So I still don't have use of my shower. It's been since Monday, so I have to shower other places. And the toilet is in the bathtub right now in both of my 2 upstairs bathrooms. So we are sleeping in the living room so that if we need a bathroom in the middle of the night or something, we can use the half bath that's down there. So it has been an interesting thing since Monday. I am not a fan of sink baths, but you know, you do what you gotta do to not smell out the neighbors or your friends. So that's what my life has been like this week. Now, last week, I went to quilt camp. I told you guys that I was going. I had a great time. The first day, I basted about 2 3/4 quilts, and then I finished that 3rd quilt and did 2 small ones on the 2nd day. And then on the 3rd day, I started actually quilting and binding and doing all that. So this quilt, I got quilted and the binding put on. As you can see from the binder clips here, I'm still doing the, I'm putting right up against the mic, I'm sorry. I'm still putting the handwork in. So this is where I've gotten done. I like this backing a lot. I think it's cool. So this is the StashBlaster 2 quilt, and so when I get it completely done, then I will go ahead and get it posted. I am binding it now so that it's quote-unquote complete, but I'm thinking maybe later I might put a large flower and maybe 2 small ones in these big triangles, and then maybe a little row of like 3 little flowers in here. But here's the thing. As of right now, it's all locked in. So I can always add more quilting later as long as it wouldn't be going all the way up to where the binding is. So if I'm just free floating a flower in here, that'll be perfectly fine to add later, and as long as I do it evenly, it'll be fine. But it is ready to go for the June due date for our 2-color quilt challenge, which is nice. And if I do wind up teaching this workshop anytime coming up soon, then I'll have one that's quilted, and then I have a flimsy, or just a top if you want to call it that, with a 4x4 layout instead of the 3x5 that this is. So I am doing the hand binding on this now. I'm about halfway, and so that feels pretty good because we had quilt camp Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and so I've gotten halfway on this. I only started it really yesterday, so I haven't taken very long. But I have I also have gotten quilted the table topper that you've seen up behind me for a while, and I got the binding sewn on by machine. So I still need to go ahead and wrap the binding to the back side, but I finished getting this binding put on today, and I got most of the quilting done. Well, actually, I got all the quilting done on the star that you've seen up behind me. The only thing I haven't done yet is stay stitch the edges and then trim it up, and then I'll be ready to put the binding on this. So I've made some pretty good progress. It feels pretty good that that things are moving along. I do have the 2 other quilts that I basted that still need to be quilted and bound and all of that, but they don't have any sort of a deadline, and so I'm not going to really worry about exactly when that gets done. I've also made some progress on the hexagon quilt. There is 1 row that's missing between the sand and the next row down that I still need to do. I did. So I haven't even started this row yet. So I have these blocks that I still need to sew together, and then go ahead and put them into the row, and then attach the rows together. But as you can see, for those of you who've been watching from the beginning, it's making good progress, and I would anticipate that last row will be done by the time I come back and see you the first Wednesday of the month. And I'm hoping that I will have started to assemble the rows together. Putting the rows together does take a bit more time because you have that entire quilt that you're flexing in order to get the pieces together. So I'm not going to promise that it'll be done. But I am hoping that of the 7 rows that are left, at least a couple of them will have been added down here to the base. If I can, I'll get it done, but I don't think I'll be able to with everything else that's going on. So that's what's going on with those quilts. But wait, Maria, I'm hearing, what about the mystery quilt? Because I've purchased my fabric and now I don't know what to do with it. Fair enough. So I've given you 3 types of table toppers: small, medium, large, and a laptop. And so what you're going to want to do, if you're doing this scrappy, or if you want them all the same fabric, you're going to cut 2 focus fabric squares and 2 background squares for each block. And there's either 9, 16, or 25 for the table toppers, and then 108 for the laptop if you're doing the small squares. I have been asked to provide the sizes for the laptop with bigger squares, and I will do that. I just don't have that calculation done yet in terms of how many it will take to do the lap size. So you're going to cut squares at 4-inch square, 2 for each focus, 2 focus fabric, and 2 backgrounds for each square. So that's all we're going to do this time. So that's fairly easy. So 18, 32, or 50 of each color. I hope that all makes sense. I don't think I'm going to get the sheet uploaded today, but it'll get uploaded tomorrow for round 2. So that'll be up there in case you forget. But we're going very simply here. I am doing 2 of them. I'm going to do 1 with just the 1 background and 1 with 2 backgrounds. So you can kind of see if you wanted to play with it at a later date, or before you assembled it, if you wanted to make a few more blocks and add in some other backgrounds. But for right now, just the one focus, 1 background. So I hope that is good. There was something else I was going to talk about. I have forgotten what it is. I apologize. Oh, I did. This isn't it. But since this is Valentine's Day week, I thought that I would turn the Starfleet Academy logo shape that was up here upside down just to make it a heart. So um, that was just me being silly, honestly. By the way, if you have any questions, you're welcome to write to me at mail@StashBlasterQuilts.com. I do respond to emails. And I also do have the website, and it still has some gaps in the patterns and a couple of other things, but we are trying to make sure that at the very least we get the annual quilt rounds up there, the mystery quilt. And I promise you we are going to work on it, but right now with the book that I'm trying to get written, I don't have the bandwidth to mess with that right now. But we're working on it. And I am going to have a new assistant in my office starting tomorrow, part-time. And so once she's up to speed, then she'll be able potentially to do some of this for me as well. So we're getting there. Slowly, deep breaths, but we're getting there. Okay, so that's that. So I didn't know if you would be interested in this, but I thought what I might do is talk a little bit about these quilts that I'm dealing with right now. Let me move my keyboard and turn it off. I always forget to turn it off, and since it's wireless, it drains the battery, which is not particularly fun when you go to and the keyboard doesn't respond to you. Okay, let me see if I can get this camera to work. Sort of. Alright, let me turn the light around. Okay. So, this is... Alright, sorry, you can see them both and it gets confusing. Okay. So, hopefully this will focus in. There we go. Let me tip it a little bit more. So this is the star quilt. And this is the one that I used the leftovers from the charm quilt, which is the other one. And I sewed around so that I could cut these out without having to do the center seam at all. And so all I've done here is stitch in the ditch. And I did it in the 3 parallel directions that make the stars. I did not do the centers. And I've been thinking about that. I just quilted this today, so I don't have an answer. But one of the things that I'm considering doing is going from the center where there's the squared up intersection here and quilting a diagonal line up and then down to the next center and then up and then down to the next center. And that means that my star will have quilted stars on the inside. Now there's a plus and a minus to doing additional quilting to these. Since I've locked down all these centers, it's not too bad. But this is incredibly thick. So the more quilting I put in here, the more you'll notice if this part's raised up. Right now it's not all that noticeable. But that's one of the things I was thinking. And there are several hexagons, so I will have to figure out exactly which hexagons to do and which ones not to do. So that's going to add an extra layer of complication to this process. But at first I wanted to make sure it was locked in, it was solid, and I could always add later if I want to. But in this case, these are 3-inch finished triangles. I don't need to add any quilting to this to have this be completely fine for having go through the washer and dryer. Okay? Now, I did something different with the charm quilt. By the way, so this charm quilt is for another challenge. It's a charm block challenge. So there were all kinds of rules for it. So this is Prince Charming, and this is his not so gallant brother Murray. I may change the name, but I kind of like having such a non-princely name for this one. Okay, so this is the charm quilt. And all I did on this one is I quilted in parallel. It's a little bit less than 1/4 of an inch. I just used, instead of the center of the foot on my sewing machine, I used the inside edge so that these would be a little bit more narrow. And so I went ahead and I just did these diagonal lines all the way across. And then I wound up with a little 6-pointed stars here in the intersections. I don't know if you can see that. I'm going to bring in closer so don't get seasick. I don't know if you'll be able to tell. Let me see if I can. Okay, so here's one right here. It's not too hard. Come on, focus up. Sometimes they autofocus and some. Come on. Well, hopefully you can see it. So there's a point here on the tan, right? One on the pink, here into the blue, up into the gray, into the white, and into the red. You can also see it. Hold on, I'm trying to do this. There we go. Because on the camera it's reversed, and so it's hard when it's up close like this. So here's another one where you can see the star a little bit. And that's kind of a nice echoing, particularly if Marie was there, so you could see the stars and the stars and the stars. I considered doing the same quilting on Marie, but because the pieces are so much smaller, the intersections are more crowded, and I don't think you would see the star. If I did the zigzaggy thing I was talking about, I would wind up with additional stars in the middle of each of those hexes, and partial stars on the outer edges, where it doesn't connect directly to the rest of a hexagon. So that's why I'm thinking about that one, because I don't know if I'm going to want those partials or not. But again, that's just a design feature at this point. I'm done with the quilting that needs to be done. I'm also done with the quilting that needs to be done on Prince Charming here. But what I'm not done with is the binding. Okay? Because it has so many zigzags, I'm going to try to move this where you can see the point. I sewed this by cutting up to the 1/4 inch mark on the quilt itself, so that I could straighten this when I was putting it through my machine and bring the binding straight across. And what that means is that when I wrap this around, I'm going to wind up with, it's a little bit hard to see here. It doesn't look really good right now because I'm not actually anchoring it down, but I will wind up with a mitered corner here and a mitered corner on the inside. And then here on the outer points, oh, you're way too close now. There we go. This might be easier from up here. When I bring this around, the bulk is here on the right, so I'm going to want to put the bulk on the left here. So you take a little partial fold, and then you fold it the rest of the way. And I'll trim that down a little bit too. So it doesn't, you're not seeing a crisp line here, but I'll use my needle and get it tight. And I'll have the pleat on the one side, the mitered edge on both sides, even though it's this super sharp point here. So I think that worked out very well. Yes, I've seen people who have machined down these extreme angles. I honestly am not comfortable enough to attempt that. This isn't an amazing quilt. This isn't one where I made sure everything was absolutely perfect or that I'm worried about it, because I'm not going to enter it in a show or anything. But I still want it to look decent. You know, that's just one of those pride of place kinds of things. So I am not comfortable enough to do that. I was telling people at Quilt Camp that I saw this woman on YouTube, and I have not been able to find her since. And she did all kinds of math on her quilt. And from the raw binding, she put in darts. And then when she wrapped around and applied the binding, it automatically fell into the points in both directions. And so it was super easy for her to do that. I have no idea how she did that. I am not doing all that math. You can't make me. I swear, no, you can't, no matter what we do. So I just wanted to say, if you've seen that, go for it. I'd love to know if you try it, how it worked out for you. But that's not something you're going to see me do here. Hopefully, I just clicked a button and I hope I didn't just... No. Okay, if this is your first time watching, you probably don't know about my hate-hate relationship with technology, but I have one. I just wanted to make sure I'm still broadcasting properly. Okay, good. So that's that. If I'm going to show you the other two quilts because we have the time. But by the way, if you are enjoying any of this, if you want to go ahead and I would appreciate that, and subscribe. That way I can, well, if you also hit the bell, so there's a bunch of different things, but if you hit the bell, you'll get notified every time that I'm coming on. Now, I do the live streams the first and third Wednesday of the month, and I do start the stream about 15 minutes early, so that what happens is that people will go ahead and get the alert and not be quite ready to watch. If I started it right on time, I'd have already been past the tip and everything else before you had a chance to get signed on. So that 15 minutes gives you a chance to go ahead and get a drink, or even just get the computer all fired up and ready to go. Okay, so the other two quilts that I basted, let me move my chair here. Oh, ooh, I just shorted out my thing, my stream deck. There we go. Okay, let me move this camera out of the way. Okay, so this is the one that I used that template that I purchased for. Now the idea on this, oops, I'm stuck on a pin here. Hold on. Okay, was that, here we go. You would apply the fabric and have some of it hang over the edges, and then you would put on other squares so that you couldn't quite tell where it was sewn and how it was applied, because quilting this in quarters would be a lot easier than doing the whole thing. And so that's what I was originally going to do. But I think what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to take the paper off of these, and I'm going to put another piece of white fabric behind. And what that's going to do for me is I can just tack them part way and then curl up the edges, because I kind of like this curled edge effect and the fact that it goes off the quilt. So I'm playing with that. Another thing I did, I don't think you can see, let me come in closer, is I took some of these petals and I made the center of the quilt three-dimensional. So there is no adhesive on the back of this. And I took some of the petals and I gathered them. I cut the tip off and then I gathered them to make this center three-dimensional, more so even than the rest of it. And then what I would do is I would put like a small yo-yo or a button or something here to be the center of the flower. So this is the other quilt that I basted, one of them. And so what I'm going to do is, excuse me, I'm going to sew some of these petals down, and then I'm going to replace these ones that are loose. They're loose so that I could move them around, and put the other petals on the back. And then I'll go ahead and stitch down those last few petals after I get the whole thing quilted. So this is one of the ones that I basted. It's kind of hard to store because with those three-dimensional, with that three-dimensional center, then if you fold it, then you crush the center. So if I had done it just according to the original directions, I would have been fine, but you guys know me by now, so I wouldn't do it the normal way. And then the last one that I got quilted is this big boy here. This is StashBlaster 3, for those of you who saw this a long time ago. And it's just this big giant spiral. So here we go. So this is half of it. I'll need pins to put this up. But you can see it starts here, and it goes around and around and around. I think you can see. Maybe not. Let me move over. Actually, let me stab a couple pins in here. Make it a little easier. Like I said, this is only half. I'm not opening up the whole thing because then you won't be able to see it. Okay. Okay, so it starts here, and then it comes over and around like this, until it actually dead ends in a corner. And so what I'm thinking I'm going to do here is, because this one is colored, the white one mirrors it. So the white one ends here. Okay. Oh. Not enough pins. Alright, one more try. So one thing I'm thinking about doing with this one is maybe putting a small flower here, and then doing a rippling vine with an occasional leaf in the open spots all the way around. So if I do that, I'm sure some of it will be done here in front of you. You'll get to see that. But the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and stitch in my ditch here all the way around to lock it in. And then that way when I go and I sew in the leaves, it's all stabilized. Now, I was asked if I was going to put anything in these squares. This is only a 2-inch distance, so I won't have any issues with my batting. And I think that having quilting in these is going to break things up a little too much. If I was only doing the stitching in the white, then yeah, I might have some places that would be as much as 6 inches apart, and that's too far. So by stay stitching it in, by stitching in the ditch, I'm going to make sure that that's covered. I don't have to worry about that anymore. Alright, let me get this down. I saw that Judy responded that she's doing her petal quilt the way we were told to, by quilting it in quarters, and then putting it together. You just don't quilt all the way to both edges, so that you can fold the quarters together and then stitch them, and then you stitch down the flowers on the other sections. Especially if you're doing a big one or it's got lots of different flowers in it, it can really get confusing as to what's happening. Right, let me come back here. I keep shocking my Stream Deck, which is the thing that lets me switch cameras easily. And my box opened. Okay. My basting technique is unusual. Can I walk you through it in a future episode? Well, I could, or I can do it now. Why don't we talk about it now? Because we have plenty of time. We've got 25 minutes. When I'm basting, and everybody assumed I was going to be hand quilting these quilts because I thread basted my quilts. Now, would it have been faster to have spray basted? Yes. However, it's too cold to do that outside now. And at the firehouse, it's not completely ventilated well enough that I would feel comfortable spraying where there's other people that were going to be inhabiting the space. Even if I just did the middle to make it easier, and only, thread basted the edges, it was still one of those, I want to make sure nobody has any issues with it. So I thread basted the quilt. All 5 of them. So what did I do? I used a curved needle. Hold on a second. I think I have them here. Yes, I have not gotten everything put away from quilt camp yet. It has been a week, like I said. Alright. So I have my supply box. Let me bring that over. I just had to get the other quilt that I decided not to baste out of the way. Okay. So I took all my supplies just in this box. Everything I needed for 3 days. Okay. Oh, this is a mistake. These are curved tapestry needles. The problem with tapestry needles is they're not really sharp. So you're going to want to get curved needles that are. I also like them a little bit bigger. So this is a little needle keeper that I have. Unfortunately, I don't have the original packaging, or I could tell you what the brand was. But these are sharp. And you can see here that they are curved. Now the advantage to having a curved needle is that when you go through the quilt sandwich, you don't have to pull up on the quilt or potentially jab your finger trying to get the point up out of the quilt. It just will naturally come out of the quilt. So what I do is I put probably 3 long stretches worth of thread on the needle. Which, yes, is what we're told exactly not to do whenever we're doing any sewing. But that works for me. And so I start in the middle of the quilt. And I do not knot the end. I will pull the thread towards me, or to the right or left, whichever direction I'm going. When I get to the end, then I will not exactly knot. What I'll do is, when I get to the end, I take a small stitch, and then another small stitch the opposite direction, and another small stitch, and then I will consider it locked in well enough. That means I can just pull it out without snipping anything. You could do a big messy knot if you wanted to, but when I'm dealing with it where part of it is taped down or clipped to a table or something like that, the knots don't tend to land right where I want them, whereas I can do this exactly as I want. So then I go back to the middle and I pick up the other end of the thread and I will draw it out, and then I will stitch the rest of the way. Now, could you just make a big messy knot at the middle and work your way each direction and then tie it off and then start again? Sure, I've done that. I tend to pull the basting out in one long piece, and I wrap it up on one of those little cards so I can use them again and again and again. That is a little bit chintzy on my part, but it seems to me a shame to just go ahead and throw it away if I don't need to. So I will take those long threads back and then I'll use them on the next quilt. I will stitch. My general rule of thumb for basting, no matter what kind of needle I'm doing, is my stitches will be no longer than the length of the needle, or in what the needle picks up. So if this is my thread needle here, when I stitch down, it's going to come up about an inch away, so I'm going to go over an inch and then take the next stitch, and then the next one and take the next stitch. You could do a slight back stitch on each one if you wanted, which would really lock it in, but it's not really necessary. If I'm doing something where I will be hand quilting it, I will baste it a lot more. Now, do you have to thread baste by hand? No, you don't. I have been known, I had a friend who had a long arm, not a long arm, she had a quilting frame that a sewing machine, a regular standard sewing machine, could go on to. And at one point she gave that to me, and unfortunately when my basement flooded and we couldn't get it dry fast enough, it got completely inundated with mold and split, and it was horrible. So I wound up having to get rid of it. But I have been known, even if I'm hand basting, to go ahead and do it on that long arm frame so that I could just go to one end on a roller chair and then go back the other way. You can certainly do that. You can also, if you either rent time on a long arm machine or you have a friend who has a long arm machine, you can just do a giant meander, because that'll lock everything in. And if your bobbin thread or your top thread, doesn't matter which one, is water soluble, and the other one is not, then it just takes a quick spritz, and then you've got these giant loops that are really easy to pull out on the other side with the regular thread. So that's something that Diane Henry taught me. She's a long armor, and she's an instructor for a handy quilter. So that's what she did for one of my quilts at one point, and that was really handy. If you're going to use a long arm, though, one nice thing that you can do is sew together a bunch of backings, especially for like charity quilts. I just take big hunks of fabric and I'll sew them all together into a big giant backing, and then roll it onto the machine as much as the machine can handle. And then I will bring up the batting and get it started the way you normally would on a long arm machine, and then float tops on and just baste and baste and baste, and then roll it, and the next one goes on, the next one goes on, the next one goes on. And then that way I'm not spending a lot of time pinning the backing to the leaders. So that saves me quite a bit of time if I'm renting time on a machine. So that's another thing you can do. I do like spray basting, but like I mentioned before, there's limitations on temperature and humidity, and I don't want to do it outside if there's at all of a breeze, because then you end up wearing the sticky stuff. So it gets a little bit more difficult if you don't have a good, well-ventilated, yet draft-free space like a garage. If you can do it on a garage, that's perfect. You set up a couple of tables, tape down your backing, and then spray baste, and that is lovely. I have spray basted on my it's not a clothesline downstairs. I have one that stretches across my open gazebo. So I have been known to spray baste when I've hung something there, and then bring it in and put it on my kitchen floor. So I'll tape down the backing, spray baste one side of the batting and put it down, and then spray baste the back of the quilt and then put it on the batting. And so all my 3 layers are joined. But again, temperature, timing, it can get a little dicier. And going in and out while you're trying to hold it all nice and neat, it's not fun, but it's easier than thread basting. So one of the main reasons why I thread baste instead of pin baste, I have done regular pins, I have done safety pins, I've done the curved safety pins. My fingers get raw undoing all the safety pins. It's hard enough to get them in and closed, but then undoing them means you get pained again. Thread basting, the only pain you're going to get is from the needle, and that's not so bad in terms of your fingers. Now, did my back hurt after doing 5 quilts in 2 days, and one of them pretty big? Yeah, my back and neck were sore, but they would have been no matter how I decided to baste all those quilts. The nice thing about the thread basting is, number one, you don't have to worry about rust if it's humid. You're not getting poked by straight pins. And if you're basting more than one, or even if you do one, if you have to fold it back up, those pins can get hung up on each other, or they can get pulled out of the quilt. And now you're not as evenly basted, and you're still going to be jabbing yourself on needles all the time. So by doing the thread basting like I did on the one I showed you, in the spiral one, I just threaded I just basted right around the spiral in the white section, so that the colored sections was completely clear, so I can go ahead, stitch in the ditch, and then I'll pull that basting thread out as the quilting gets put in. It'll just be easier that way. So yeah, it's basically I don't want to bleed on my quilts, which I have done with straight pins, and I don't want my fingers to hurt a lot, which happens with safety pins for me. And since I couldn't spray, it means thread. Now, do not use good thread for this. If you're going to be basting, use the cheapest thread that you've got. Even your old thread that you would never sew with because it's too weak is fine for basting. In fact, it's even better. So whatever you have that's still on a wooden spool, you probably don't want to sew with these days, just because it's old enough that if you spend all that time getting it into your quilt, it's likely to pop, and then you're going to wind up having to redo the work. And who wants to do that? But it's perfectly fine for basting, so that you can just whip out a whole bunch of it, and if it breaks, it's not a big deal. Especially if it breaks when you're doing the quilting part, because that'll just be that little section will get broken, but you'll be working it, and you're going to be pulling it out anyway. So for thread basting, I would say, yeah, use the cheap stuff if you can. And I wouldn't baste any further than a hand width apart. Now, I have had some people who counted this the width instead of the length. The closer you do your basting, the more stable your quilt is going to be. Now with the, actually, you might be able to see it here on Murray. Hold on. When it came to the points, let me see if I've got a good one here. Okay, let me show you this. I made sure that the points were basted down. Now, I didn't worry about it as much with Murray as I did with... But you can see that I actually started my basting here. I took a couple little stitches and then I went corner to corner, because it's a 6-pointed star. Right opposite this will be another point. And so I went across first, and then I went around the entire shape here. On Prince Charming, my first stitch actually was only in maybe 1/8 of an inch, no more than 1/4 of an inch from the point. And I put a couple of stitches holding the very tip of the point down, and then I went. I'm not done quilting this because I haven't done the stay stitching here, so you're not seeing that, but I wanted to make sure that this gets locked in. And I saw this technique of putting either 1 or 2 rows of stitching. So some of these I did 1. Here's 1. Okay. Just to hold the point down and straight, so when you do your stay stitching, it finishes where it should. I'm not sure how much I like that compared to just basting it down, but I did want to try it because it's a little bit different technique than what I normally do. I like all my points, no matter where they are or how acute the angle is, to be down solid on my outer edges. Because the one thing you don't want to do is have the point, as it starts to come together, do this, so that you've got like a cresting wave shape instead of this nice firm structural triangle. The triangle is one of the strongest shapes in nature, so it deserves to be honored as such, if you want to put it that way, so that it gets the care that it really needs. So again, with my basting, I make sure that those points are down. That's about it that I can think of with the basting. If there was anything else, Judy, that I had mentioned during quilt camp that I'm missing here, please go ahead and tell me. People were kind of surprised. I'm the only one that basted over the entire 3 days. But the first day of quilt camp, we were going to have to pack our machines up. We have our quilt camp at a firehouse. And we rent it for the 3 days, but Tuesday night is bingo. So we have to take all of our stuff down and haul it all away and then bring it back on Wednesday. And I was feeling a little too lazy to do that, to put it bluntly. So I went ahead and just planned on doing nothing but the basting and maybe some handwork. I had a couple of quilts to bind. Oh, excuse me, my nose itches. A couple of quilts to bind. And so I had plenty of work to do. I had squares to cut. I overloaded my project box. Because one thing I don't like doing is having extra time that I want to stay and chat with people, but with nothing to do, I feel guilty doing nothing. So it's kind of a self-preserving thing to overpack, which is funny because over the years I have been practicing underpacking for trips. So, I take about half of what I used to when I'm going to be going on a trip to speak at a convention or something along those lines. So it's almost the exact opposite. So it feels kind of weird. It really does. But it does mean that I don't run out of things to do. So if I get all those speeches I was talking about in the past, this summer, I will have plenty to work on with me. So that's just one of those things where I want to make sure that I'm prepped for the right stuff. So for Tuesday, I didn't take anything that used a machine. Wednesday, I took my machine and I quilted the blue and white quilt after I was done basting. I basted until lunch, and then from lunch until the end, which is at 3 o'clock, I quilted the blue and white quilt, which was perfect timing. I finished like 10 minutes before the end. So by the time I packed everything up, we didn't have to remove it Wednesday night, which was nice, but I still like to tidy my space, and deal with things. So I got that done. So then Thursday morning when I got there, I squared up the blue and white quilt and sewed the binding on, and then started quilting the Prince Charles quilt. And I finished quilting that here, as well as doing the star, as well as putting the binding on Prince Charles. So there's been quite a lot done since Thursday. And that feels pretty good. And of course that's in addition to everything else that I have on my plate. So I'm feeling pretty good about how productive last week was. And I was thrilled to find that when I was at the meeting yesterday, that we're going to do a summer camp. So we're going to do 3 days over the summer where we're going to be able to be at the firehouse and sew. It won't be as elaborate because at quilt camp we have instructors and they teach us a bunch of stuff. There was a mystery quilt that was done there. And we got little pieces each of the 3 days. There was other little projects like a notebook cover, and a wristlet, which is basically a pouch with a wristband on it, and a zipper. And there was a lecture on putting together orphan blocks to make a top. And the gal who did that brought in a ton of orphan blocks and people sewed them together. And then those quilts are going to go to charity, which is nice. That was Lisa Langley. I'm trying to think of what else was taught. As part of the mystery quilt, they taught some techniques, but I think that was it. And then there was people just working on their own projects as well. And it's a lot of fun. There is one downside that a lot of people were complaining to me about, and the fact was they were having such a good time chatting amongst the group that they, by the end of the first day on Tuesday, hadn't done anything. So they carried their machines in and then didn't sew a stitch because they were having such a great time chatting. And I think that's wonderful. I think that's one of the best things about quilt camp is the time to chat with other people. I felt kind of alone in my corner basting, but it needed to get done, and it was so much easier to do it on a raised table than on the floor that I was like, I'm not going to lose this opportunity. But there were several people that said that they didn't accomplish anything. It's also very nice because people bring in snacks in the morning, and then lunch was included. I don't think we're going to be doing that in summer camp. I think she mentioned we'll just brown bag lunch. But even so, having the full day from, I think it's 9:30 to 3 that we can be in there, and you've got the big tables and you've got lots of people to ask for their opinions, um, or if you're stuck on something. Like with the mystery quilt, I wound up helping a gal because she had gotten confused in terms of the settings squares, and so she wound up with this almost diamond shaped quilt instead. When she laid it out, she hadn't sewn it yet. Instead of the rectangle it was supposed to be. Actually, no, it was supposed to be a square. So, because the squares were on point, it just kind of befuddled a little bit, and that's perfectly fine. I love being able to help with any sort of thing like that, and having other people where you can say, this doesn't look right. And that's what she said to me. She said, I don't know what's wrong. This doesn't look right. And so when I looked at it, I had to say, okay, here it is. You've got a half triangle here when you need a quarter triangle. And then as soon as that popped into place, it made sense then. That was all that was wrong, was that she had just put halves instead of quarter. And she was able to just go right ahead then and get the whole thing assembled, and it was a beautiful top. So, that kind of thing is really helpful. And I have a bunch of people that I ask questions of. So I mentioned Diane Henry with the water-soluble thread for basting. You cannot use water-soluble thread if you're hand basting. I will just warn you that right now. It is not strong enough. It will just keep popping, and the moisture from your hands, just normal, even if they're not sweaty, just normal moisture from your hands will dissolve it in spots, in which case you've wasted your time. Sorry, I just thought I should mention that. But I will often, talk to Diane or some of the other members there whose work that I particularly like, either color selection or how they quilt or if they're appliquing or whatever. And it's a wonderful way to be able to get advice and to share ideas and things like that. Get opinions. And of course there's just lots of time to gossip and yammer, and that's always a good thing. So I hope you enjoyed today. When I come back the first of the month, like I said, I'm hoping that the hexagon quilt over here, I've started to assemble more of the rows together. Because I just, like I said, have the one that I need to actually do the blocks and then put the blocks into the row. And the blue and white quilt will probably be probably have the binding down. I don't know about the others. It depends on the tile guys, because I can't work when they're here because they're so loud and give me a splitting headache. And I have my new girl starting tomorrow in the office, so she's going to take quite a bit of attention. So I don't know how much, but I'm going to get done as much as I possibly can. And you will, of course, get the updates as usual. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed it. Again, the first of the month, I'll be here 7 o'clock. I'll start the thing the 15 minutes early. If you've enjoyed this, the yammering part, please feel free to stick it out next time too. And like, subscribe, hit the bell, etc. If you have any questions or anything, you're welcome to either put them in the chat, or you can go ahead and email me at mail@stashblasterquilts.com. And then I will either reply directly if it's a question that is extremely specific, or if it's something that's a little bit more generic, then I may reply on the next live stream so that other people can hear the answer as well. You don't have to ask me only about quilting types of organizing. I'm happy to talk about any part of the house that's giving you a problem. So have a wonderful couple of weeks. The second round notes should be up tomorrow for the mystery quilt, and I hope that you enjoy it. So I will talk to you very soon. Take care. Bye-bye.